History tells the story of the world and of our lives. Sometimes that history goes bump in the night. Broadcasting from the center of oddity and the supernatural in Central Florida, it's the History Goes Bump podcast.
Hello, you spooktacular people. Welcome to this 585th episode of the History Goes Bump podcast. Ghost Tours for the Theater of the Mind. I'm your host, Diane.
And this is Kelly.
Kelly, on this episode, we're doing a location that was suggested to us by two of our listeners. Brittany Cox suggested it several years ago, and then Missy Crawford just recently suggested it, so I'm like, we should get on this one. It's the S.K. Pierce Victorian Mansion in Massachusetts. Not only is this house glorious, we have to buy it. It is literally for sale right now. We could get this as an HGB clubhouse, Kelly.
Sounds good to me.
It's only a little over $1 million.
Oh, is that all?
Yeah, we could do
That's
a fundraiser.
Pennies.
But it's got some amazing spiritual stuff going on here. I mean, this place sounds like it's off the chain when it comes to activity.
Even better.
Yes. We'll get into that in just a moment. Before we do that, we want to welcome into the Spooktacular crew, Jana. I hope that's how you say it, Jana.
Thank you so much for joining our Facebook group.
And now this moment in Oddity.
The moment in Oddity was suggested by Michael Rogers. The vast majority of caterpillars are herbivores. They can quickly consume all the leaves and blossoms of your favorite garden plant. There are some caterpillars, however, that fall into the category of carnivorous, believe it or not. One of these carnivorous caterpillars is known as the bone collector caterpillar. This interesting little fella is found on the island of Oahu, Hawaii. Describing the insect as unique is an understatement. The caterpillar is a scavenger for the most part, but it is also known to be cannibalistic at times. Yes, they will also eat their own kind. This strange insect will pull its meals from spider webs. Sounds dangerous for the caterpillar, right? Well, not entirely. The creatures disguise themselves with the cadavers of other insects that they find. This helps to camouflage them while pilfering their next meal from unsuspecting spiders. These carnivorous caterpillars happily feast on the leftovers that a spider has hanging around in its web. The caterpillar's corpse costume hides them from the unwitting spider hosts. This newly discovered insect was happened upon by Dr. Daniel Rubinoff and his colleagues while hiking the Waianae Mountains nearly 20 years ago, but only recently has an article been published about it in April of 2025. At the time of its discovery, the group was searching for the Hawaiian case caterpillar, who shares the same genus as the bone collector caterpillar. The doctor stated, "We see this little tiny sac covered in bug bits, and honestly, we weren't sure what it was. And then we take it back to the lab, and we realized there was a little caterpillar in there. A caterpillar that masquerades in a macabre mask and gives us Buffalo Bill, Silence of the Lambs vibes certainly is odd."
Grab your slippers, hot chocolate, flashlight, and maybe even that baseball bat.
And now this month in history.
In the month of May, on the 7th in 1833, composer Johannes Brahms was born in Hamburg, Germany. Brahms composed over 200 songs in his lifetime, including orchestral, choral, piano, symphonies, and chamber works, including his German Requiem, commemorating the death of his mother. In his early years, he studied music with his father, who was a horn and double bass musician. By the age of 7, Johannes was sent for piano lessons with F.W. Kossel. Then, 3 years later, Brahms graduated to lessons from Kossel's teacher, Edward Markson. As a teen, Johannes earned money for his family by playing near the docks of Hamburg. He He also spent time composing and giving recitals. In 1853, Brahms was recommended to composer Robert Schumann, and the two struck up a friendship. Due to the praises of Schumann in a public article, Brahms became well known in the world of music. Brahms was influenced by composers like Schumann, Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, and Wagner, just to name a few. Though he never married and was not apt to showing his emotions in his personal life, his musical compositions displayed deep and emotional spectrums. Pieces would range from intense energy and drama to impeccable lyricism. Despite not easily showing outward emotions, Brahms loved spending time with children and dogs. After his good friend Robert Schumann died in 1856, Brahms offered Clara Schumann, Robert's widow, emotional support and assistance. Although Johannes and Clara developed a strong connection, historians debate whether or not they ever became more than that. In April of 1897, Johannes Brahms passed away from cancer of the liver less than a year after the death of Clara Schumann.
One can't miss the S.K. Pierce Mansion in Gardner, Massachusetts. This magnificent mansion is a huge Victorian that takes up the whole corner of West Broadway and Union Street. The grand exterior makes it very inviting, but the ghost stories connected to this place might just make you think twice before entering. There are those that claim that this home is the second most haunted house in Massachusetts. Some owners have been chased out by spirits. There could be more than a dozen spirits here, and one of them may be the furniture magnate for whom the house was built and named, S.K. Pierce. Join us for the history and hauntings of the S.K. Pierce Mansion.
As I was saying, Kelly, just last month, April of 2025, the S.K. Pierce Victorian Mansion was listed for sale. It's a little steep at $1.2 million, but it has a fascinating history. The mansion is located at 4 West Broadway in Gardner, Massachusetts. Gardner was first settled by Europeans in 1764 and incorporated into a township in 1785. The town was named for Colonel Thomas Gardner, an American politician and soldier who was fatally wounded at the Battle of Bunker Hill. Woodworking factories and sawmills were the initial industries, and this would grow into a furniture manufacturing powerhouse that included 12 furniture factories. So many chairs were made here in Gardner, Kelly, that it became known as the chair city of the world.
Oh my gosh.
So if you wanted a chair, this is where you went. And interestingly enough, the mansion is for sale right now at $1.2 million. They averaged 1.2 million chairs a year.
Oh, wow.
A little synchronicity there.
Just a little bit.
To recognize this, the town has a 20-foot chair monument, which I could not possibly get into. I mean, I guess all of us...
Even if you weren't fun-sized, you probably couldn't.
All of us would probably have a hard time getting up there and sitting in it. But a little fun fact is that an employee of one of these furniture companies, Edward G. Watkins, created a time recording device in 1888 that was used to record employees' work schedule. You know, a time clock. And it was because of this that we get our saying, punching the clock.
Oh, something I get reminded to do every Friday.
Gardner became the city of Gardner in 1923.
We've talked in other episodes about lumber barons and robber barons. Perhaps there was such a thing as furniture baron. Okay, so that's our creation. But if there was such a thing as a furniture baron, Sylvester Knowlton Pierce would have been one. I guess the term magnate fits better. Pierce was born in 1820 in Massachusetts and went by the nickname of S.K. He married Susan Elvira Jackson in 1845, and the couple had one son in 1856 whom they named Frank. S.K. amassed a large fortune with his furniture empire, and he decided it was time to build himself a home befitting his station in life.
And I think it's very fitting that his wife's middle name was Elvira, and she's going to live in this place. Construction began on S.K.'s masterpiece of a Victorian mansion in 1873. It's going to take about 2 years, and I think I read 200 men helped to build this house. Architects E. Boyden and Son designed the mansion in the Second Empire architectural style, so it basically looks like the Addams Family house. We'll post a picture as the cover page for this episode, so you'll get to see it, but in case you don't see that, just think about the Addams Family house, and that's what this is. And the current paint job is dark gray with black shutters, so that fits with the imagery perfectly. We're not sure what color it was originally. I've also seen it yellow, so I know before this it was yellow in color. When the mansion was completed 2 years later, it was 3 stories tall and had a basement that had a tunnel that led across the street to a furniture factory. Why it had a tunnel going underneath the street, I don't know. Maybe it was a weather thing because it's Massachusetts and it would make it so that they didn't have to, because you don't want to drive if you live right across the street from the factory. But I don't know, maybe it was too hard to walk across. Anyway, it just kind of gives the basement a little bit more of a creep factor having a tunnel down there. Of course, the tunnels have fallen apart and are closed off now. There were 26 rooms that included 10 bedrooms, a formal dining room, billiards room, 2 parlors, library, and 4 bathrooms. SK spared no expense in the construction, and he made sure the house was as modern as possible. There were 2 cisterns that collected rainwater from the slate roof, so the Pierces had running water in the house.
That's amazing.
There was gas lighting, and there were speaking tubes and electric bells for communication throughout the house. So it was kind of like our modern day intercom system. That's what they were doing back then to get the servants' attention and such. A dumbwaiter could reach all 3 floors. The interior decor was gorgeous with 16 types of wood and hand-carved moldings and cornices, a walnut staircase, Tiffany glass everywhere, crystal chandeliers, and massive doors that were 9 feet tall and constructed from solid black walnut. And when we say solid, we mean solid. The doors weighed over 500 pounds apiece.
Good grief.
Get those things open. A tower with a circular staircase. It's like a spiral staircase. It is so cool. Led up to a widow's walk, so the family had sweeping views of South Gardner.
Sounds like it was befitting his magnate level.
Yes. I mean, he built the house to who he was in the community.
Tragedy struck right after the Pierces moved into their dream home. Susan contracted a bacterial infection that we have heard was the flesh-eating kind, and she passed away only a few weeks after moving into the house. SK grieved her for a year, but when a woman 30 years younger than his wife caught his eye, he got over his sorrow.
No, I don't know if it was that easy, but he definitely got a younger model for sure. 30 years, not only his wife's junior, but also his.
This was Nellie West, and he married her in 1878. They would have 2 sons together, Stuart and Edward. Together, the Pierces became the social hub of Gardner. They hosted P.T. Barnum and other prominent people in the area. After 10 years of marriage, S.K. passed away in the house in 1888, and he left the house to Nellie, who remained in it until her death in 1902. Then the house passed on to the 3 Pierce boys who fought over ownership of the house and the furniture business.
Yeah, they each took turns suing each other.
Lovely. Frank and Stuart finally gave up and left the house to Edward. The Freemasons used the house for meetings at this time, and Edward hosted some famous people at the house, including President Calvin Coolidge, when he was a senator for Massachusetts, Norman Rockwell, and Betty Davis.
Yeah, apparently she just lived down the road.
Nice. Another tragedy for the Pierce family took place here when Edward's 2-year-old daughter contracted a bacterial infection and died in the house. We're not sure if it was the same kind that Susan died from.
And I believe his daughter's name was Rachel.
About that same time, the Great Depression began, and it hit the furniture business hard. Edward couldn't keep up with the house, so he and his wife opened it as a boarding house. This part of the history is murky. The sensational stories claim that the place was a brothel that hosted gambling and drinking. A lady of the evening was said to have been killed here in what later came to be known as the Red Room. Of course, we found no newspaper accounts to support this.
This is something that definitely is coming from psychics that have come through there and investigators that have done investigations. I don't know how true it is, but I would think something like that would make the papers because it's not a secret that a family would be trying to hide. It's a murder that took place in this house. A Finnish immigrant named Ino Sari was sleeping in his bed when a fire broke out in 1963. When the firemen arrived, they found a weird situation. Kelly, one of the things that always fascinated me about my unsolved mysteries of the universe from Reader's Digest were stories of spontaneous combustion.
Absolutely.
And I know we've discussed it on a couple episodes on here. It's like, how does someone burst into flames, almost get completely consumed by the fire? So you're talking about a very intense heat, with just parts of them left behind. Like there was that one woman who burst into flames and like just part of her leg was still left and the chair wasn't even consumed. It was just her body was like gone. Same thing happened here. Sari had been mostly consumed and the bed was badly burned, but the fire hadn't spread to any other part of the room. So to me, that is a classic spontaneous combustion. Then there are stories that a young boy drowned in the basement around that same time too. Many people had died here. Obviously, we had a lot of family members that have died here, so we've had a lot of death in this place. Edward maintained ownership of the house until 1965 when he had to sell it out of the hands of the Pierce family, and a good friend named J. Stemmerman bought the house and allowed him to live at the house until he died in 1967. So I think Edward, what he did is he just moved down to the basement, and so he mostly lived down in the basement. But it was very cool that Jay was like, look, I know you can't pay the back taxes. They're going to take it from you. I will go ahead and cover everything. You just keep staying here. By the 1980s, Stemmerman had abandoned the house. Jay was an artist, and he created some weird pieces while at the house that he left behind. Paintings depicted half man, half beast creatures, or half women, half beast creatures. Other pictures depicted orgies. So Jay was doing some weird stuff here.
The mansion was slated to be demolished in 1996, but fortunately that didn't happen. The Victorian was bought in 2000 by Susan and Mark Vaux, and they renovated the house. Weird stuff started happening in the house, and they eventually invited Taps to come investigate, and after that, they decided to start hosting ghost tours of the house. They put the house on the market in 2007 when they divorced, and had to keep reducing the price before anyone would buy it because of the haunted reputation.
Yeah, back then it wasn't quite a catch for you to have a haunted location to sell.
A couple who did buy it in 2009 had no idea about the hauntings. They just thought they were getting a great deal. Amityville, anyone? Although we don't believe that house had any hauntings. Anyway, Lillian Otero and Edwin Gonzalez became the new owners. After they purchased the house in 2009, they had so many paranormal experiences that they moved out of the house. The couple claimed that the ghosts in the house were angry and threatening, and that one of them had even possessed Lillian. They claimed the place had been their dream home, so something must have happened to them. We'll get more into their experiences in a minute. When the couple moved out, they handed the keys over to a woman named Marion to be the caretaker, and despite new owners, she has remained the caretaker to this day.
The Dark Carnival is a circus-themed haunted attraction that was established in 2010 and provided high-intensity, scary shows across the state of New Jersey. They worked with top animators and prop masters in the haunt industry to keep their shows cutting edge. And you're probably wondering, why in the world are they all of a sudden jumping into talking about this haunted attraction called Dark Carnival? Well, in 2015, they, and the they is Rob and Allison Conti, decided to go a different route, and they acquired the S.K. Pierce Mansion from Edwin and Lillian and set about restoring it further. So the way that you see it today is what these people have done with it. So they've done a magnificent job. And yes, Lillian and Edwin owned the house for 7 years, but only lived in it for 2 of them. And Lillian, she always wanted to have a Victorian mansion for them to fix up. And so she really kind of twisted Edwin's arm into doing this. And I think that's why they kind of stuck it out as long as they did, because she just really loved this house. But I mean, if you drive people away from a home that, you paid good money for and you love it, something clearly was upsetting to them. The website for Dark Carnival reads, "The Dark Carnival will open the mansion to the public for overnight rentals for the brave souls who wish to experience the mansion during its darkest hours, and for historical ghost tours where guests can learn about both the positive and negative history of this home. During the Halloween season, we plan to open the basement only of the mansion, weekends only in October, for what will truly be a one-of-a-kind S.K. Pierce-themed Halloween attraction, as it will be the only haunt in the country that combines the haunt industry and the paranormal industry." And that's actually not true. There's several haunted attractions that are actually in haunted locations too. As guests travel through the bowels of the mansion, they will encounter 30 to 35 of our trained actors, high-end illusions and animations, and may even get a glimpse of the truly paranormal. Best of all, since this attraction is only in the basement, guests can have some scares in the spirit of the season without ever affecting the majesty of the main levels of this marvelous home. It's like they kind of put that out so that history enthusiasts and people who love Victorian mansions like us don't go, well, don't wreck the place.
And, well, that never seemed to happen. The website is set up for tours, so we believe they did offer those through the years. And now the place is on the market for over $1 million.
And now a little break for a word about one of our sponsors.
Today, the house sits on 0.23 acres and has 9 bedrooms and 3.5 baths, with that gray exterior adorned by black shutters. The listing agent isn't shy about the haunted reputation and is using that as an angle to sell the house. And there are many stories to back up those paranormal claims. Residents of the house and guests have all claimed to experience paranormal activity. Full-bodied apparitions were seen and furniture would move on its own. Disembodied chanting and voices have been heard. The screens have come flying off the windows. There have been foul odors and weird temperature changes, and probably the weirdest claim is a sound like a lion's roar, which could shake the house. Visitors claim to be pushed by something that can't be seen. One was almost pushed down the stairs, and another felt as though something tried to force them out of a third-story window.
I really don't know what's going on with this house here. You have these people, the Contis, the husband, I think his name was Rob, has always dreamed about having his own haunted attraction. So when he had a friend contact him and tell him that this was available, and they can't, I guess it's very hard for them to have haunted attractions in New Jersey because there was a bunch of teenagers that got killed back in the 80s or something in a fire in one of them. So he jumped on it. And they went to all the trouble to really, the house is gorgeous inside. It is set to be, wow, we could bring in some income in the paranormal industry with this thing, not just having the haunted attraction or whatever. And they had, I think it was over 3,000 people that were on a waiting list to overnight at this location. And I'm like, what happened? I can't understand why it wasn't turned into a bed and breakfast or, it seems like it's a ripe opportunity. So why would they go to all the trouble to get it all set up and it's ready to go and then we're just going to sell it?
Pretty bizarre.
Now, I do know one of the problems that it does have is there's no parking. And so in order for you to have a haunted attraction, you definitely have to have parking. I know we actually made money in my previous life in Colorado. We owned some land and it was right across from a haunted attraction. And we would rent out that land that we had over there before we actually put a building on it for them to use as parking. So we made some buck doing that. So I don't know if it's, that's part of the issue. I don't know if the city's frowning on this. I really don't know what's going on, but it just seems like a great opportunity. And if you work that hard for it, I don't know why you wouldn't stick with it. But who knows? There could be something going on in their personal life, too, that it's just not feasible for them anymore. There are estimates of at least 13 ghosts here, with a few of them being identified. These include S.K. Pierce himself, Susan Pierce, his first wife, Edward Pierce, a Pierce nanny named Maddie Cornwell, David, who is nicknamed the Red Room Strangler, so I don't know why he would be here, because I don't think he died here. I don't think this actually even happened here, but he definitely didn't die here. And then there's the prostitute who was murdered in the Red Room. There's a young boy, a younger girl. Sari, the guy who burst into flames, is supposedly here, and some unnamed dark entities in the basement. A neighbor living next door had seen lights turn on and off in the mansion when it was empty. The fire alarms would go off as well with no fire, which is interesting considering that, Sari also burst into flames, so I don't know what's going on there. And this neighbor also would see shadows moving inside. And then clearly Mark and Suzanne had experienced some stuff as well because they invited ghost hunters to come in and started doing their own ghost tours, which I guess they kind of found out backfired on them when nobody would buy the house because they're like, no, you've told us it's haunted. We don't want it.
Edwin Gonzalez knew in his gut that something was wrong with the house before they put in an offer in 2009. When he and Lillian toured the house, he felt a weird pressure in certain rooms, and he even became nauseous a couple of times. He hoped it was just lunch. He hoped it was just lunch because Lillian really loved the house. After they closed on the house and moved in, they met their neighbor, and he asked them about their children. Edwin and Lillian were confused because they didn't have kids. They explained they had no children, and the neighbor looked confused. He asked, "Who was the kid that I saw earlier in the house today?" Edwin asked, "What do you mean?" The neighbor explained that he saw a boy who was probably 5 or 6 years old looking out of one of the windows on the 3rd floor, and then almost immediately that same boy was looking out of a window on the opposite end of the house. Edwin just said there was no way because only he and Lillian were in the house, and that it would be impossible for anybody to move that fast in the house because that person would literally have to go through a wall to do it that fast. Lillian and Edwin didn't immediately think that they had a ghost, though. Maybe just a weird neighbor.
You'd have to be able to go through a wall. Sounds like a ghost to me. But it wasn't a weird neighbor who slammed one of the big doors downstairs in the middle of the night, awakening Lillian and Edwin. They would also hear loud knocking, and the doorbell went off by itself later that week. Edwin worked from home, and he made the former nursery his office. He was working in there late one afternoon when the image of a man appeared and rushed towards him. The vision was so real that Edwin threw up his hands to protect himself and squeezed his eyes shut. When nothing happened, he opened them and looked around the room, and there was no one there. So you could just envision this where you're like, ah, and you put your hands up, and then you're like kind of looking through them as you're spreading your fingers out like, where did he go? He checked the house, and he was alone. It really freaked him out. He believed this was the spirit of Inosari. One morning, Lillian was awakened and told by a voice to get up and get dressed and go into the basement and start digging.
Digging?
Why? She dug around in the kiln and found a bone. Edwin thought she was acting really weird that day, and he went downstairs and was trying to talk to her. She just didn't seem like herself. So this is almost like where she's doing got possessed by something and is digging around in there. Because she kind of barked at him when he was like, well, what are you doing? Digging around in the kiln and stuff. And she was like, leave me alone. Get out of here. That kind of stuff. Edwin had a doctor's appointment the next day, so he took the bone with him. The doctor confirmed that the bone was human, and he said it was the pelvic bone of what probably was a teenage female. So the police came to investigate the house and took the bone, and no one knows who the bone belongs to, but there is some lore that claims SK's son had impregnated a servant girl, which could be that nanny who's haunting the place, and did away with her. So I don't know. We don't have a story that this actually happened, but that's why I said sometimes if it's a family secret, I can believe, we're not going to get something in the newspapers about that. But if it's an actual real murder that's outside of the family and everything and nobody's hiding it, I don't understand that. So it's possible that something like this happened, especially if the nanny's really here. And watching some of the investigations that I've watched in this house, you do get the impression at least something is impersonating a young servant girl, possibly. Lillian and Edwin's stories and this discovery of the bone led to a book written by Joni Mann entitled Bones in the Basement, Surviving the S.K. Pierce Haunted Victorian Mansion. And I wanted to read from the first chapter of the book. The boy stared up at the creepy old house, feeling a lump grow in his throat. And this is something that they used to do a lot, especially when it was abandoned, is, hey, are you brave enough to go in the haunted house? The other kids wanted to break in and play a game of hide and seek. He wasn't sure he wanted to. Something about the house troubled him. When he drove past it with his mother, he always glanced up at the dark windows, feeling like someone was watching him. Nobody had lived in the house for as long as he could remember, but everybody knew about it. It was the haunted Victorian mansion. He went to school with a girl who used to live next door. She talked about seeing faces at the windows and lights blinking off and on all during the night. She told him that a man once burned to death in the house when he spontaneously combusted, and how his ghost still roamed the shadowed hallways. At the time, he swore he would never go inside the scary old house, but here he was all the same. "Are you coming, Trevor?" one of the kids called. He glanced around, noticing that he was the only one who hadn't crawled through the basement window yet. He swallowed the lump in his throat, wanting very badly to retreat to the safety of his home and watch an episode of Scooby-Doo instead. But he couldn't figure out how to do it without looking like a chicken. He gave the house one more cautious glance and then climbed in after his friends. "I'll only stay for a little while, then I'll tell them I have to go home for something." They crept in through a basement window. The space was so dark, all he could see was the bobbing light from the flashlight ahead of him. Something brushed the back of his neck, and he jolted with a gasp. The other kids jumped too, but soon laughed as they realized what happened. "What's the matter, Trevor? Afraid of a little spider's web?" He took a deep breath to steady his nerves and tried to shake off the feeling that wouldn't leave him. They weren't supposed to be there. He could feel it in every cell of his body. And let me just say, Lillian, before they moved into the house, they were doing a lot of the renovating and stuff themselves. And she said every time she was down in the basement working on something, she always felt like something was watching her. So that's a key thing in the basement, is feeling like you're being watched. At the top of the stairs, they found a doorway that led to the first floor. Trevor looked around, taking in the wooden floors and the furniture covered by sheets. It was exactly what he thought of when he imagined a haunted house. The only thing missing was the ghosts. As they tiptoed through the old house, they began hearing strange sounds. At first, the sounds were subtle. They heard the creak of a floorboard in another room, which was followed by the echo of footsteps on the grand staircase. And again, this is something else that a lot of people describe when they're in there, hearing footsteps. One of the children started counting, so he scrambled up the grand staircase to the second floor to look for a hiding place. The first room he came to had red walls. Oh no, the red room. Something about the room made him feel uncomfortable, as if someone hid in the corner watching him. He gave the doorway a wide berth and studied the second room he came to. It looked like it could have been a kid's bedroom. It was small and square with 2 doorways and a strange-looking closet. Something about the closet appealed to him. The door was short, as if it was made for a kid. As he stood in front of it, he heard the counting girl reach 20. "Ready or not, here I come," she announced. He opened the closet door and scrambled in. The darkness nearly closed in on him, so he cracked the door an inch and allowed a ribbon of light inside. He watched several kids run past the doorway looking for a place to hide as the counter made her way up the stairs. "I see you, Jimmy," she yelled. Trevor held his breath, praying she didn't look in his direction. If she did, she'd probably find him in a second. It wasn't exactly the greatest hiding spot. She continued past, and he let out his breath. I made it. He listened as the girl walked up the narrow staircase to the 3rd floor, thinking that he'd just stay in the closet until all the other children were found. He heard the sound of more footsteps in the hallway. As he leaned forward to see who it was, something happened that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Hands grabbed on to his shoulders. "Get out!" a voice whispered in his ear, before giving him a shove forward. He stumbled out of the closet, a scream lodged deep in his throat. As he rounded the doorway, he turned back in time to see a transparent boy grinning at him from the depths of the closet he'd just departed. He didn't stop running until he reached his own doorstep. He wouldn't return to the house until years later, until his Aunt Marion took him on a tour. Aunt Marion is probably the caretaker? Because that's the name of the caretaker now.
Yep, likely. Joni was part of investigations in the house, and during one, they recorded this EVP saying Franklin.
I'll go ahead and play that for you, and I just doubled them up, so it'll play twice.
What's the little boy's name?
Franklin.
What's the little boy's name?
Franklin.
And they got this through the spirit box in the basement.
Are you afraid of the entity in the basement?
Devil.
Are you afraid of the entity in the basement?
Devil.
Sounds kind of like devil to me, Kelly.
Sure does. Is this confirming a demon in the basement? And there's this chilling EVP. A female voice calling out for help?
I mean, it's what it sounds like to me.
Joni told the Dark House podcast during an interview that she felt the spirits turned negative on Edwin and Lillian because they weren't upkeeping the house. Once the current owners came in and started pouring money into repairs, the hauntings became much more friendly.
Yeah, so it's almost like somebody's like, cool, you're taking care of the house, then we'll take care of you. Ghost Adventures visited in 2013 on the invite of Lillian and Edwin, so they wouldn't live in the house anymore, but they're like, hey, you can come investigate it if you want to. They caught the sound of several loud bangs that seemed to get progressively louder. Aaron was touched on the shoulder by something on the 3rd floor, and when he and Zach ask who's up there, they hear an audible me. The 3rd floor X camera captures a ball of light that moves above the mirror and disappears into the room that Zach and Aaron are standing in front of. The spirit box says, he's here, David, hi, no, not sure, and Lillian. The only EVP they capture said, go to sleep. A woman named Jean visited the house in October 2022. She wrote on Facebook, a tour was taking place while I was there. These were guided tours and they started in the basement and worked their way up. When I got home and looked at my pictures, I could clearly see a man with his hands behind his back on the 1st floor. But up on the 3rd floor, there was a young boy pointing down to us. The tours were by group, guided, and if they were only on the 1st floor, who was that young boy on the 3rd floor? You can see the man on the 1st floor window on the right. The boy is on the top floor middle window. We'll go ahead and post that picture because I do have that. And there is clearly a little head up in that window. It's crazy. Then the reason why I know that Marion is still at this place and that we've got a lot of this stuff still going on is that Jason Hawes has been here to the S.K. Pierce mansion 3 times, and the most recent time was just last month too. It's so funny that Missy had contacted me on Instagram and said, hey, have you guys done the S.K. Pierce house? And I'm like, oh no, I've heard about it before. I knew it was on our list. And I was like, it's been suggested twice. I should do it. So I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and just do it as our next one. And so then when I'm looking it up, I'm like, oh, it just happens to be for sale right now. And then I'm looking about ghost hunting there and everything. And I'm like, and Jason Hawes has literally just been there. And he said he's always had activity here, no matter when he's come. Upon entering, Jason and his friend JV immediately heard a bang coming from the basement. So it's like, it's on the minute they walk in. They put a REM pod on the kiln down there. They hear a noise that sounds like a bunch of boxes falling over, and then an audible whisper. The REM pod went off a minute later when they asked if the person who was hurt was there with them. And then they heard whispering again. They were hearing a lot of audible voices, which always creeps me out because it seems like if you're getting an audible, ghostly voice, they seem to have more energy. It's like they could break through it. They don't have to just leave you an EVP. They think they picked up the sound of a cat later, and there are reports of a ghost cat here. This was a really interesting investigation, especially with all the audible voices, I think. The caretaker manager that we mentioned earlier, Marion, shared a picture with the guys of a figure captured in a window, and it sure looks like a woman. Or maybe it was the door. I'm not sure, but we'll go ahead and put that one on Instagram too. It was pretty crazy. And then I found this other investigation that took part here. It was on the Stromedy channel on YouTube. This was very interesting to me because they got to go do a tour of the house with Marion, and when they go down to the basement, and while they're down there, Marion shared a picture of something that was taken down in the basement. We'll share that on Instagram. It is chilling. I don't know what the hell this thing is. It is very tall. It looks like it's almost as tall as the ceiling, and the ceilings, despite it being a basement, are very tall. They look like they're probably 10-foot ceilings. So whatever this thing was had to have been at least 9 feet tall.
Yikes.
They used a phone app for a ghost box initially. They actually had a real spirit box, Kelly, the kind that we use. So I'm like, why didn't they just get that out? Because I don't trust phone apps at all. But anyway, they got some interesting stuff that mostly felt negative, telling them to leave and go. But of course, it uses its dictionary that it has in there. So I'm like, well, when it tells you to leave or get out, that's just a common thing. They felt like many spirits were trying to talk to them. And there was like this one male spirit that kept coming through, and it seemed like he was in charge and not letting everybody else talk. So a lot of people wondered if that was SK since this was his house. The group went upstairs and used a real spirit box and thought they were communicating with Maddie. And the story they got was that Maddie was dragged out of this room down to the basement and killed, and that Sylvester is the bad guy in the house. And that's SK's real name, Sylvester. They also did what I would call a sort of Estes method, Kelly, because she just put the headphones in her ears, like the little earbuds in her ears.
Right.
And then was listening to the spirit box. And without having noise canceling headphones on, I don't really trust that you can't hear what's being said to you. I mean, we have to trust that she couldn't hear what they were asking her. But during that, they got that this was a family secret and a son was involved.
Oh boy.
So I don't know, maybe there was a nanny here who really did get knocked up and then they did away with her. I mean, I don't know. Where did that pelvic bone come from? And they have pictures that they show you when you're doing the tour at the house and everything. And it seems legit. I mean, I would want to actually talk to the police and find out if they have a record of having that bone and why did you not investigate it further? Is it just too far back, a crime that it didn't really matter to them? I don't know. But probably the best thing that happened during this investigation, I don't really, trust these kids or what they're doing necessarily, but they asked Maddie to give them a sign that she was there. And there was like this weird beep. I don't know if it was on the REM pod or whatever, but then they asked, could we get another sign that you were here? And there was this chair that was across the room from them. So nobody's near it, and it started rocking on its own.
Oh, wow.
Now, they do like to make their own videos that are like these found footage, and they get like the EMF is going off, and they have different things happening. So, I mean, I know how you could make our equipment. All you got to do is put a cell phone underneath that EMF under the desk, and you could get it to start pinging and stuff like that. I don't know if they were playing around here, but they all seemed legitimately like, look at the chair. And it wasn't like going crazy. It was slight.
Subtle.
Yes. So because it was subtle, it made it more believable to me because that seems like it's more of a paranormal thing. Because I've never seen a chair rocking on its own that was like, wham, 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 rocking really hard like you'd see in a movie. They'll make it really dramatic.
Right.
And this was just, you could barely see it moving, but it's like, yep, that chair is moving. I will also warn you that, this new generation of YouTube ghost shows and stuff like that, I don't know why they do the jerky camera thing. It's like boom, boom, boom. They like bounce between the people who are talking instead of just pulling back and doing a full group thing. I don't know if it makes people feel like you're more in the middle of the action and it's more exciting or whatever. But for us old folks, you just give me a headache. And I'm like, could you just hold the camera and not jerk it around? But I've noticed that a lot of them, like Sam and Colby, do that too. And I'm just like, okay,
We're not recording the Blair Witch Project.
Yes, this is not the Blair Witch Project anymore. So please hold the camera steady. And they had a lot of silly, scared reactions like, oh, we gotta get out of here. Oh my God. And it's just like, okay, you came into a haunted house.
What did you expect?
I don't know. I've just never had that kind of reaction. I've always just been like, how cool.
But we don't have millions and millions of views either, so.
That's true. That's why I'm like, we're doing something wrong, Kelly.
This mansion is just glorious to look at, and the fact that it possibly has spirits inside it makes it even more enchanting. Many people have had experiences here. We hope that whoever buys it next does indeed open it to the public, as there had been a waiting list of over 3,000 people wanting to overnight at the place. Is the S.K. Pierce Mansion haunted?
That is for you to decide. This place looks so cool. And man, if I could buy a place, I had the money for it, oh yeah, I would totally be down for this. We'd love to have you guys check out our website at historygoesbump.com. And if you'd like to send us some feedback, you can do that at historygoesbump@gmail.com. I want to thank you guys for joining us on this episode. I've been your host, Diane.
And this has been Kelly.
You take care now. Bye-bye. This episode is brought to you by our executive producers.
Join me in the cemetery by becoming an executive producer. You can join on Patreon or PayPal. Check out the Support the Show tab on the website for more information.
The caterpillar is a scavenger for the most part, but it is also known to be cannibalistic at times. Yes, they will also eat their own kind.
I've been described that way too. In his early years, he studied music with his father, who was a horn. Horn
dog. He was a horn dog.
I should have
That
gone.
Was terrible.
I should have read the rest.
It went
of
off the rails
sentence.
already.
Oh boy. In his yearly ears.
It's yearly ears.
It was his yearly years.
It's yearly early, except we're recording in the afternoon for once.
Oh man, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. As he rounded the doorway, he turned back in time to see a transparent boy
Greening at him.
greening at him. He was greening. A ghost could be green, even if it's translucent. Kind of a greenish haze.
I mean, Slimer.
There you go. Okay. Maybe it
With
was
a big-
Slimer and he
with
thought
a
it was
big
a
grin.
boy. Was it starting to eat everything in the house? It could be Slimer.